We are at Kuf Yud Amid base at the bottom, 101b at the bottom. And the Mishnah had said, a koshel ikarin, a cup made of roots, they're ground together as a potion. And the Gemara said that there were different ways of drinking it, with wine and with beer, 2 measures, 3 measures, and they had a different effect. And for jaundice, drinking 2 with beer, mi'akir, would cause sterilization, would cause someone to be infertile. And Gemara asked, how can you do that? The Torah says that a man is not allowed to make himself infertile, or you're not allowed to make another man infertile. You're not allowed to cause, even the halacha is even an animal to become infertile. So the Gemara says must be that we're talking about a man who's already infertile, and he's taking this for jaundice, but the effect would be that he's infertile. So the Gemara says that can't be either, because even someone who is already infertile, you're not allowed to make infertile. The Gemara, the Torah says 4 forms of detachment or a breaking of the connection to the testes, and they would all they're progressively worse, more detached. And the reason the Torah said in that order, the Bryce is going to tell us that even someone who's somewhat already detached, making him more detached or more broken, is also going to be a form of making someone misaris, which is making someone infertile, and it's prohibited. And Gemara says, so therefore, the same over here. This person that's already masuras, meaning he's already infertile, should also be prohibited to drink this cup of ikrim, which is going to cause infertility. We turn to Kuf Yud Aleph from an Aleph 111a. Everybody agrees that if somebody makes a mincha offering, which may only be made as matzah, it's not allowed to be chametz. As we know that the Torah says you're not allowed to bring karbanos that are chametz onto the mizbeach. So somebody's making the mincha, and the person who's kneading it or mixing it made it chametz, and then the person who set it up made it chametz. The person brought it on mizbeach made it chametz. There's a separate prohibition for each because it's progressing within the chametz. So everybody agrees that even though there's a question about putting a mum, putting a blemish into a bechor that already has a blemish, because there it's already not fit as a carbon, adding in the process with chametz is going to be an additional prohibition. Shenemar, as it says in the Torah, lo te'afei chametz, you can't even bake it chametz. So not only it's making it, but even the baking it. And lo se'aseh chametz. So you're not allowed to bake it chametz. You're not allowed to have it made chametz. So each step of the way is going to be a prohibition. And similarly, everybody will agree that mesares acher mesares, somebody causes in a form of sirus. After sirus is also going to be chayev, going to transgress the prohibition. Shenema, for it says uma'uch, which is, let's say, crushed, v'kasus, v'nasuk, v'karus. And the difference between imal karus chayev, if you're obligated already for karus, which is not completely cut off. For sure, al nasuk, for sure when it's already completely cut off. To tell you that not only karos alone, but even if it's karos already, which is the partial detachment of the testes, and so then somebody goes ahead and completely detaches it, it would also be chayiv for sirus. Shu chayiv, the ela bezakin. So must be we're talking about an old man who's already infertile, and therefore he could take this medication. The Gemara says, no, that's not sufficient. Rabbi Yochanan speaks of various foods that brought him back to his youth, meaning that allowed him, even in his old age, to be fertile and be able to father a child. Ela be'isha must be, we're talking about a woman. And since the Torah does not obligate, we say la'alacha, that a woman is not obligated in the mitzvah pruruvu, in the mitzvah of being fruitful. And so since she's not obligated in the mitzvah, she's allowed to take a medication which would cause her not to have children. And this is since she's exempt of the mitzvah, she doesn't have a prohibition of making herself sterile or infertile, and is allowed to take a medication such as this for jaundice, even though that the side effect is going to be that she becomes an akara, that she cannot carry children, cannot become pregnant. And this is halacha. So this in this case of koshel ikrin is talking about a woman. Indeed, a man at any age would not be allowed to take it, but for a woman, she's allowed to take this. Well, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka, that he says that women are obligated in pruvu, and both are obligated, both a male and a female are obligated in the mitzvah. So what are we talking about? Bizakena. So we're talking about either an elderly woman who at postmenopausal there's no returning to the youth, and therefore she's allowed to take this, or by someone who is infertile from the start. In any case, so we had these potions that you're not allowed to take on Shabbos on account of that it's not coming to heal ailment that makes someone bedridden, as it were, or it changes their functionality in the day, but rather a minor ailment that you're not that's just bothersome, but you can go about your day regular. You're not allowed to take it on Shabbos unless it's a proper food that would be eaten in any case. Hachoshesh b'shino. This Mishnah is the one that Michael mentioned yesterday. So somebody has a pain in his teeth. He's not allowed to either swish or swallow vinegar, which will then rinse out the mouth and hopefully help the tooth feel better. But he can take bread and dip it into the vinegar as it is and eat it properly. And if it causes healing, great. Somebody who has an ache or pain in his shoulders and his sides. So he's not allowed to smear on wine or vinegar as an anointing, as a smear, a massage into his side, into where the pain is, because those are done only for medicinal reasons. Nobody puts that on unless it's there to help their pain. But he's allowed to put oil, because that's things that people would do even if they don't have an ailment, to put on a lotion, to put something that smooths out the skin, and if it heals, and if it heals an ailment, great. But not rose oil that's with roses in it, because that's not done unless somebody has an ailment. However, b'nei malachim, but b'nei malachim, princes, are allowed to use this because they do this even on a weekday, and therefore they can put it even on a wound. Rabbi Shimon says, Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim, all of b'nei Yisrael are princes, and therefore, if something is done by some people because they're princely. So then all of Am Yisrael is allowed to do it as well. So Rav Shimon says. So the first halacha said, if somebody has a toothache, he may not swish or swallow vinegar, to help his toothache. We have a contradiction. He asked to Rabbi Abo, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, somebody has a toothache shall not swallow or swish vinegar. That indicates that vinegar helps. It heals. It's good for teeth. But the Torah says, the pasuk says, in the same Mishlei, somebody who's lazy and doesn't follow through on a project that on a mission they've been given, they are like vinegar to a tooth and like smoke to an eye. Seemingly very, it's detrimental and painful and harmful, not good. So how can you say that vinegar is good for the tooth? Here we have a pasuk that tells us this is the metaphor of something that doesn't work, as something that's painful. Well, Zengmar says actually it depends what we're talking about. Are we talking about type of vinegar that comes from unripened grapes, which is sharp and hard and bad for the teeth? And regular vinegar that comes from good wine that's gone sour, that's good for the teeth. Or perhaps both of them are talking about regular vinegar, which is wine vinegar from a wine that went bad. The ikamaka, the lekamaka, but it depends if there's a wound or not. Ikamaka, if there's a wound, masi, it's helpful for it. Lekamaka, if there's no wound, marpi, it softens the gum and it can harm the teeth. And it says you shall not swallow this chametz, the vinegar. But the Brisa makes a distinction. It says you can't swish it around and then spit it out. But if you plan to swish it around and swallow, that you are allowed to do. Our Mishnah must also be talking about, like the Brisa, that he did not swallow it. He swished it around and he spit it out. But if he swallowed it, that looks like he's eating and it's going to be fine. Rava says, Rava says it depends. No, it could even be talking about that he's swallowing it. And nevertheless, it does not look like a regular eating. It looks like he's doing something medicinal. Depends if he's already eaten or not. If he's already eaten bread and dipped it in his dips, and then he's going to take some vinegar and swish it around and swallow it. So that looks like it's medicinal because he's already eaten. However, if he has not yet eaten, and it was common that they would eat their bread with vinegar, dipping in vinegar or dipping in some other dips. And so if he swished and swallowed prior to eating, it looks like that's a part of his, he's eating a dip straight, but it's a part of the eating. So the Gemara says, let's say, and the Gemara says, if it's true that there are some times that doing this same act is going to be okay on Shabbos, then even at another time where it doesn't look right, it should also be okay. Because we say, the halacha is that something that's permissible on Shabbos as a typical thing to do, it is permissible in all circumstances, like we see in this halacha in regards to Yom Kippur. The Shme'inin the Rava the Islay Hoyel, because we know that Rava says that we say Hoyel, since this is permissible partly on Shabbos, it's permissible anywhere on Shabbos and even on Yom Kippur. Dama Rava says there's nothing that's permissible on Shabbos that's prohibited on Yom Kippur. If it's permissible on Shabbos, and Yom Kippur is also a form of Shabbos. It's called Shabbos Shabbosim. It's also going to be permissible. Oil the Shabbos Shari, since it's on permissible on Shabbos, Yom Kippur Nami Shari. It's also going to be permissible on Yom Kippur. So what's that case? And as a rule, he says, therefore, before the case, that anything that's permissible partly on Shabbos or some point on Shabbos is going to be permissible anytime on Shabbos. This is in regards to going to the mikveh on Yom Kippur. So we say, since that in such a manner, you're allowed to go on Shabbos, even though you're not allowed to take a vessel and take the mikveh on Shabbos because you're in a certain way completing the vessel, you're turning it into a usable vessel because you're not allowed to use it prior to toveling it. So even though the vessel is complete, but by taking the mikveh, you've turned it into a usable vessel. So that's a form of makim apatish, a form of tikkun maneh, completing or fixing a vessel. But yet, a person is allowed to go to the mikveh, even though that the person himself is going to. Someone had a question?
Yeah. Sorry. Yesterday, the case with the pita and the chometz and being able to rinse and swallow or not rinse, not swallow. Why does it sound like to me like the issue is Maris Ayin? I mean, what's the other what are you talking about in absolute form, or what's the issue here? Because
it's a rabbinic case. It's a derabanan. Gzeira Shema. It's an enactment because maybe someone's going to do something. It's not Maris Ayin that other people misunderstand what you're doing. Rather, that's clear. It's medicinal. It's no longer a food. In all these cases, the idea is anything that's defined as food is permissible to be done on Shabbos, even if the result is that it heals. But anything that's not typically food, so then it's going to be defined as taking medicine, and then we're afraid that you're going to make a potion, not just do a little medicine. You're out doing medicinal. You're out doing remedies. Well, if you're doing a remedy, so then we're afraid that you're going to create a remedy by making a potion, grinding it up, and that's usher. So for a minor ailment that doesn't change the way you're acting, meaning you could go about your day regularly, so then you can't take this level of for this level pain or discomfort. You can't take medicine because you may end up making medicine. So what defines taking medicine versus eating food? Well, if it's a typical food, so then it's food. If it's atypical, then it's medicine, and that's the definition here. If you've already eaten, Rava says, so then putting vinegar in your mouth is atypical, so that's medicinal, and you're not allowed to do it. If it's before eating, so then it's a part of your eating. So back to the question from Rava's halacha. So the Gemara says, okay, fine. It's true that at some point it looks like it's medicinal, but at some point I'm allowed to do it on Shabbos. And since I'm allowed to do it at one part of Shabbos, I'm allowed to do it at any part of Shabbos because there's nothing that's prohibited for part of Shabbos. It's either permissible on Shabbos or prohibited on Shabbos. And if I can do it in the morning prior to eating, so that I can do it after eating as well. Like we see that Rava says in regards to Yom Kippur, where the halacha is that in general on Shabbos we say you're not allowed to take a vessel to the mikveh, which completes the vessel, but a person can go to the mikveh, even though that going to the mikveh essentially makes a person tahor and makes them in a certain way, it makes them a completed person, a more whole person. Nevertheless, the reason they can go is because it could be that they're just going to cool off in the mikveh. It could be, it doesn't look necessarily that they are going to perfect themselves, meaning to cause tahara, to bring tahara to themselves. It could be they're going to just cool down. The Gemara says, okay, great. That's on Shabbos, where it looks like you're cooling down, but in Yom Kippur you can't even wash your hands properly, your face properly. How can you go and into? You're not going into bathe. You're not going to cool yourself down on Yom Kippur. So then it's clear that you're going into the mikveh to make yourself to make yourself tahor, which is changing your status to make yourself better. And so that's matakin atzma. You're making yourself more whole. So it should be prohibited, and it should be rabbinically prohibited on account of fixing yourself. Now, again, as we mentioned, this is not a real tikkun mana. This is not a real makah b'patish. It's not by real I mean it's not the oraisa. It's not a Torah prohibition. But the question the Gemara had was that it should be prohibited rabbinically because it looks like, or in concept, is acting like completing a vessel. And so therefore, going to the mikveh, which makes a person tahor, should also be prohibited. And that Rava says no. Since at some point on Shabbos it's permissible, the other Shabbos, Yom Kippur, is also going to be permissible, even though that the logic doesn't apply to Yom Kippur as it does to Shabbos. But the rules have to be the same. So if Rava says that in regards to Yom Kippur and Shabbos, for sure within a Shabbos itself, he's going to say the same thing. And he's going to say that if something's permissible partly on Shabbos, the Chachamim would not prohibit it on the other part of Shabbos. And so if I can take this in my minor ailment going on, I'm allowed to take this vinegar and even drink it straight prior to eating, then I'd be allowed to do it even after eating. Gemara says, you're right. Rava retracted, and he says, like Abaye, that even prior to eating, you can't swoosh and swallow. You can only swoosh and spit out. So the Gemara says, how do you know that he's retracting that? Maybe he's retracting the halacha of Yom Kippur, and he's saying that and there is no such concept that if it's permissible at some point on Shabbos, it's permissible the rest of Shabbos. How do you know? How do you know that he's retracting from this? Maybe he retracted his opinion in regards to the other, in regards to Hoil, which we say that if it's permissible part of Shabbos, it's permissible the rest of the time. It doesn't seem logical. Why? The time we learned because we have a brisa that says explicitly that anybody that is obligated and go to the mikveh can go in the mikveh, even on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, where typically you're not supposed to bathe. You can go to the mikveh. So you see that even Yom Kippur you can go to the mikveh. So Rava would not have retracted that. Therefore, it must be that he retracted the idea that he had here that there's a distinction prior to eating or after eating. And indeed, you cannot swish and swallow the vinegar, but you can swish and spit out if you have this minor ailment in your teeth. Sorry, the other way around. You can swish and swallow because it looks like eating, but it doesn't. You cannot swish and spit out because that's clearly medicine. Back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said, somebody who has a back ailment or a side ailment, it's a tight muscle or something. So then he's not allowed to put wine and vinegar on because that's clearly medicinal. But he's allowed to put on oils which are not medicinal. So Amar Rabbi Amar Rav, Rabbi Shimon, that the halach is like Rabbi Shimon, who says they're not only regular oils, but even rose oil is allowed to be used. And even if the person themselves is not a prince and during the week they can't necessarily afford it, wouldn't put it on unless it's medicinal, since enough people who can afford it, who are princely, do put this on even during the week. So Am Yisrael, a nation of princes, can put it on Shabbos. The Meimer de Rav, Rabbi Shimon Svirle. So what you're saying is when Rav said halachic Rabbi Shimon, perhaps this is a general rule that he follows the lenient opinions in regards to Shabbos of Rabbi Shimon, and just as over here he says that you can that Bnei Yisrael are like princes and they're allowed to use the rose oils, which they couldn't necessarily afford and wouldn't do during the week. But since some people do, we can do it even on Shabbos. And so too, he follows the leniency of Rabbi Shimon elsewhere. Also, lahat could be so the way they would fix barrels in order to get the wine out, and they would make a hole at the bottom of the barrel while the wine was in it and holding it up upright, so on its side, so that the hole is up, and they would take a spigot and they would force it into the hole, and then they would turn it upright. And this way, they could the dispense of wine with a spigot. However, the spigot itself and the hole were typically not perfect. So the way to seal that, they would take some cloth, some shmatas, wrap it around, and when they stuffed it in, that would cause a sealant. Now, even though that it was absorbent and it would sometimes drip out, but it would mainly seal it, and it was enough. So, and this is the way they would seal their barrels. So this squeezing in of this cloth with the spigot is prohibited on, Rav says, prohibited on Shabbos, on Yantif even. So we turn to Kufiyat Aleph Amid Beis. Asalat can be Yemtiv. You're not allowed to put it on Yantif. What's the reason? Because of Schita, because you're going to be squeezing out whatever is already absorbed in the Shmata. By squeezing it in to make it tight, you are going to extract the wine that's already absorbed in the Shmata. And even though you don't intend for that, nevertheless, it's going to be prohibited. So we see that Rav does not follow the leniency of Rabbi Shimon, because as we've seen many times already, Rabbi Shimon is lenient in anything that, any malach of Shabbos that is unintentional. Over here, what are you intending to do? You're intending to put the shmata in as a sealant. You're not intending to extract the little bits of wine that's in the shmata while you stick it in. You have a whole barrel of wine. That's what really you're trying to do, is to get the wine that's in the barrel and to get it efficiently with the spigot. And the cloth, which may have some wine absorbed in it, even though it comes out, that's not your intention. So Rav, who is strict and says you cannot push this in on Yantif, and he's concerned about the wine being squeezed out, is clearly not following the opinion of Shmuel, of Rabbi Shimon, who is lenient whenever something is done without intent. That whenever, because Rabbi Shimon says, "But Davar Sheina Miskavin is pater." That you're not. This is it's you can stick it in because you're not intending for the squeezing to happen. And Rav says no. It's true that Rav follows Rabbi Shimon in leniencies, but here even Rabbi Shimon would agree. Rabbi Shimon agrees that it's prohibited to use this shmata as a sealant and squeeze the spigot in. Now, as we've seen, Abaye and Rava say that Rabbi Shimon is going to agree and prohibit something that is a sick ratio when it's absolutely going to happen. You can't squeeze in a wet shmata as a sealant into a hole that's not exactly tight, and you're going to squeeze the spigot in with the shmata and expect, if you want it to be tight, you know that it's going to squeeze out some of the juices that are already in the shmata. That's the nature of it. It's impossible to do it without it, and therefore it's a psik reisha. It's an absolute that's going to happen, and even Rabbi Shimon says that it's prohibited. As we saw earlier, either that it counts as your act even if you don't intend, or by definition you're intending for it to happen since it's absolutely going to happen. And even though we saw earlier that it would require some that you want it to happen, even though we saw earlier that it's going to require that you want it to happen, over here, you can't say you don't want it to happen because it's just adding wine to your drink, so that's not a bad thing. In any case, so our question was, why did Rav say that Allah is like Rabbi Shimon Bayas and lenient that you can even use rose oil as smearing onto a place that you have a tight muscle or an ailment? because he's lenient like Rabbi Shimon, and he's lenient like Rabbi Shimon even in regards to Malachas Machshavas, into Dover Shein Miskaven. And over here, the case of the spigot, the reason it'll be prohibited is because it's secretion. It's absolutely going to happen.
That's the question, please.
Yeah.
I don't remember what all the details, but I remember that there's a distinction made for like a shmata that you don't care about it. You're not interested in preserving it or whatever. It's just a shmata. And that there's a difference between schita on that kind of shmata and a regular piece of clothing. Is that do I remember right? And why doesn't that apply here?
Yeah. Okay. So as we mentioned back when we learned the halacha of schita, of squeezing out juices from something else, that there are when squeezing out a cloth from the liquids in it, there are multiple possibilities of what the prohibition is. One is schita of mefarik, generally seen as like squeezing a grape for the juices that are trapped inside it. So too, squeezing a cloth for the juices that are in it or the water that's in it, it would be prohibited. It's going to be the Rabbanan, rabbinic prohibition, based on the idea of extraction of something that's in it. That's what we're talking about here. And there, it obviously would be that the item that you're extracting, that you want, is something that's of benefit and that you want, and that you may want, or somebody may want. So over here, what's in this? This is, it's got wine in it, and the barrel is wine, and it has, and this is a cloth being used as a sealant for the spigot. So the wine that you're squeezing out is going into wine. So you can't say, I don't want that, and therefore it's going to be a prohibited. The case that you're talking about is another prohibition of another concept of Isser in regards to squeezing out a cloth, and that would be cleaning it. So if I have a tablecloth or a towel that got wet, and I squeeze it out, it's not for the liquid, but there I'm malabing. I'm cleaning the towel from the dirty water that's in it. There, if it's a shmata, if it's something that I don't care, I don't care for it at all. To say it's a paper napkin, so I have paper towels and paper napkins, and I'm wiping up a spill, and by picking up the paper napkin, some of it's going to squeeze out. So there, the liquid is not something I want, nor is the cloth something I want to clean. It's not something that I'm trying to whiten, as it was a malabin. I'm not trying to clean the cloth. So there's not this idea of malabin won't apply. So over here as well, if the prohibition was malabin, cleaning the cloth, obviously that would need an explanation. What makes anybody think that I care about the cloth being cleaned, this shmata, and as a sealant being cleaned? I'm about to stick it into a barrel where it's going to be turned red from the red wine in any case. So that wouldn't apply here. And what you're talking about a useless cloth being permissible, that not prohibited in the same way of squeezing it out, that's on account of malabi, of cleaning. So Gemara says, but in the name of Rav, it was said that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda with something that's unintentional. So how can you say that he follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, who says that something that's unintentional is permissible? And in the name of Shmuel, it was said, halacha Rabbi Shimon, that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, that anything that's unintentional is permissible. So this was who the halacha is like, is actually machlokes between Rav and Shmuel, and Rav is strict and doesn't follow Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Tzvi actually said the same thing, but he didn't attribute it to someone else, but directly to Rav and Shmuel. Rav Amalach Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel Alach Rabbi Shimon. Halama Rava, so rather Rava says something else. Ani varisha bechabura targim. I and the lion amongst our group, the strongest student amongst our group, interpreted, and who umanu, and who is the strongest of our group? Rabbi Chia bar Rabbi. So Rabbi Chia bar Rabbi, he said, "Halacha Rabbi Shimon v'la mitame." The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon, but not on account of his reasoning. My halacha Rabbi Shimon v'la mitame. Ilim halacha Rabbi Shimon the shari. The halacha is like Rabbi Shimon that it's permissible to use this rose oil. However, v'la mitame, but not on account of his reasoning that everybody is like a prince. The ilu Rabbi Shimon's savar masi. Rabbi Shimon says it heals, and nevertheless, everybody's allowed to do it on account of that we Am Yisrael are princes. Meaning, it can't. If it's permissible to some people, it's permissible to everybody. V'Rav savar lei masi. Rav says no. The reason that it's permissible is because it doesn't really heal. V'savar Rav lei masi. Is really the opinion of Rav that it doesn't heal. But we see that this is what the princes do, that they put the Shem and Vared on their this rose oil, they put it onto their ailments. Rather, what it means is the halacha is like Rav Shimon, but not on his account of his reasoning. The Rav Shimon he says that even though that it's not common in his place, meaning even if in that locale, nobody uses it. It's not commonly found, and therefore it's clearly medicinal. You can't say some people do it, and therefore everybody can use it, because in this locale, nobody does it. And yet you're allowed to use it because in some other place, some people use it. And Rav says it depends. If in your area there are some people that use it, so then you can say, look, if it's permissible to some, it's permissible to all. Like Rabbi Shimon says that everybody it's something that people sometimes do on a weekday, so it's permissible to all. And since in the place where Rav was, it was common for people to, or some people at least, to do this smearing of rose oil, even on a weekday, even without an ailment. Therefore, on Shabbos, anybody, even though they couldn't afford it generally, and the only reason this person is doing it is because of their ailment, they're allowed to do it on Shabbos. Haner Allah Shemana Shratzim. With this, we complete Shemana Shratzim. We shall come back to you as Hashem is. We're going to begin Eluk Sharim, which deals with the prohibition of the two of the 39 malachas, which is kosher umatir. Kosher is making a knot, matir is untying a knot. The general concepts for knots would have to be that it is a professional knot, or a permanent knot, or maybe it requires both, and what the definition of a professional knot versus a commoner knot. In the poskim they deal with, is it based on the style of the knot, or how many people know, is it common for commoners that know how to do it, right? Depends on whether they were a Boy Scout or not, or does it depend on the general population? So these are the knots that would be included in the Torah prohibition of knotting, and if somebody made this knot on Shabbos, they would have to bring a chatas. Kesher hagamolin, the knot that people that care for ride camels make, on account of that camels are fast and strong animals, and you want to hold them together, so they make knots between them. So that's the knot made on the rope between them. That's a professional knot, and a solid knot, and that's prohibited. Similarly, kesher hasapanim, also a boat's knot, or sailor seaman knot. And just as there's a Torah prohibition and an obligation of a chatas for somebody who made the knot, so too there's a Torah prohibition and a chatas obligation for somebody that unties such a knot. Rabbi Meir says the definition is, if you can untie the knot with one hand, that's not a knot that you're going to be obligated for. My kesher gamal and kesher asapanim. What does it mean when it says this knot of the camel people and of the semen? Ilema kitri the katri bezamama. Is it the knot that's a hole in the spike that's in their nostril or in their mouth, the bit? So the kitr, the katri bistarida, and the knot that's made there's like a ring that's put into the mast or something, so to hold the boats together. Those are knots that are temporary knots. They're not permanent knots because you want to be able to take it off. So if it's a temporary knot, that wouldn't be a Torah prohibition. And so must be that we're talking about something different. Ela kitr de zamama gufei is thrida gufei. So it's not the knot made that attaches to the bit and ring or to the ring that's on the boat, or rather it's that knot itself. Essentially, what we have is that there's a permanent knot that's made on a ring on the boat, and then anytime you need to attach the boat, you would put a rope through that ring and make a temporary knot on the rope that's going through that. But the initial ring, that ring attachment needs its own knot. That one is permanent because you want that to remain in place. So wherever you go, whenever you need to attach it, you're going to have that base for the knot. Rameir says any knot that you can untie with one hand doesn't count as a permanent knot, and therefore it's or a knot that is prohibited. The brother of Maracha asked, "Aniva l'Rameimau. What about a bow, according to Rabbi Meir, which is it's tight, but it can be pulled apart?" Time of Rabbi Meir is the reason because you can take it apart with one hand, and this you can just pull and take it apart with one hand, and therefore it should be permissible. Or perhaps the reason that Rabbi Meir said that if you could take it apart with one hand, it's not a knot, is because it's not tight and it's not secure, and therefore it doesn't really count as a knot because it's too loose. It can come apart, but over here it's actually very tight. It's just that it's a slip knot. It's a bow. It's done in a way that you can actually pull it apart easily, but it doesn't mean that it isn't tight. It actually is tight. Teku. So we don't have an answer as to what Rabbi Meir's opinion would be about an aniva. Allah is not like Rabbi Meir in this case. In any case, but how would Rabbi Meir have said? What is the reasoning of Rabbi Meir is what's unclear over here. The next Mishnah says, there are knots which are going to be exempt, and you're not going to be obligated like the two previous knots that we mentioned, the camel knots and the boat knots. Let's leave this next Mishnah in the Gemara, the knots that women make, etc., that are going to be prohibited, but not but not a Torah prohibition, and the ones that are actually going to be permissible. We'll see that all as Hashem tomorrow.